If you're watching this video, it means we have successfully communicated with you through our Kepler 2 NCC 1701 mission. We are historians, hired by NASA to represent the United States of America, our great country on our home planet Earth. Now I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, what makes this country so great? Well, here in America, we believe in a little something called American exceptionalism. And by American exceptionalism, we mean the United States has a unique character and set of ideals based on democratic and individual liberties. It means that we are different from other countries and strive for the common good of all people. We value liberty, freedom, equality, and the American dream. We have selected 10 key aspects of our country's history from our colonization to present day that best exemplify American exceptionalism. Please silence all other communication devices, remain seated, and enjoy our featured presentation.
Common Sense, a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine, is considered one of the most important elements that incited and surged revolutionary ideas in colonial America. This pivotal document served as an inciting force in the surge of revolutionary sentiments among the colonists. Although never previously exposed to the works of philosopher John Locke, Thomas Paine was deeply influenced by Locke's ideas and liberal philosophy. Common Sense incorporated aspects of Locke's liberal philosophy and Aristotle's notions of republicanism. His pamphlet was initially published anonymously, and it eventually sold over 150,000 copies by the summer of 1776. This carefully crafted 47-page pamphlet promoted ideas of independence that spread across the colonies like wildfire. The pamphlet advocates radical independence and a complete break in relationship from England. Common Sense is comprised of 4 sections that formulate a convincing argument for independence from England. Paine emphasizes that a government is not a fixed institution, but a creation of society. Paine goes on to argue that small islands not capable of protecting themselves are the proper objects for kingdoms to take under their care. But there is something absurd in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island. He uses logic and reasoning to prove how a large nation governed by a small island is impractical. Paine also includes religious arguments to incite a revolutionary response among his readers. According to Paine, everything that is right of reasonable pleads for separation. Even the distance at which the Almighty hath placed England and America is a strong and natural proof that the authority of the one over the other was not the design of heaven. He claims that God even supports colonial independence because of the nation's separation and distance. Common Sense has proven to be a great representation of American exceptionalism due to its overwhelming national response among the colonists. Previous to the publication of the pamphlet, most Americans opposed British oppressment, yet they had not considered revolting. Common Sense reveals the logical reasons that justify independence from England. Throughout history, Benjamin Franklin has proven to be one of America's most well-known and influential figures. An innovator and thinker, Franklin's ingenuity and reasoning have made him the ideal representation of American exceptionalism because of his pursuance of the American dream, scientific contributions, and political career in both domestic and foreign affairs. Benjamin Franklin's austere and religious upbringing in a poor Puritan household contributed to his desire to pursue the American dream.
Franklin's rags to riches life correctly reflects the numerous economic opportunities available in the United States, land of freedom, where one can work their way out of poverty into wealth. Born in 1706, Franklin was the 15th child in his Puritan family, and from a young age was greatly influenced by the works of Isaac Newton and John Locke. Denied a complete formal education, Franklin worked as an apprentice to his brother at a Boston newspaper and, after moving to Philadelphia, opened his own printing press, where he published the Pennsylvania Gazette and Poor Richard's Almanac. While pursuing the American dream, Franklin's hard work and dedication to improve his economic status allowed him to retire at the age of 42. In addition to Franklin's business career, he also revolutionized the world of science through his discoveries and inventions. Credited with the invention of the lightning rod in 1749, Franklin was better able to understand the natural phenomenon of lightning through his famous kite and key experiment, and relate it to his laboratory observations regarding static electricity. Franklin also transformed the daily lives of the colonists with his invention of the Franklin stove. This metal-lined fireplace provided additional heat while reducing the smoke released by ordinary fireplaces.
Similarly, Franklin's charting of the Gulf Stream, invention of the bifocal lenses, and contributions to meteorology changed the field of science forever. Not only was Benjamin Franklin a scientific innovator, but he was also a very active political figure in colonial America, serving as both a revolutionary leader and a foreign diplomat. Although Franklin grew up with a deep appreciation and allegiance to Britain, his support eventually shifted in favor of colonial independence. In 1754, delegates from northern and mid-Atlantic colonies gathered to discuss their defense plan related to the French and Indian War. Proposed by Benjamin Franklin, the Albany Plan of Union called for a strong and unified government for the 13 colonies, the first prominent example of cooperation and unity among the colonies. As a foreign diplomat, he worked closely with politicians in France and acted as a peace commissioner for the Treaty of Paris. Benjamin Franklin exemplifies American exceptionalism through his innovations and political contributions. Franklin's landmark discoveries and inventions have led to the creation of many other devices. Similarly, his diplomacy and political career correctly reflects American ideals of democracy and freedom.
Although not commonly listed as a major event in American history, the Revolution of 1800 was a defining moment for the young democratic experiment. Following George Washington's presidency, which ended in 1797, political parties, or groups with the same basic ideals, began to form. In the election of 1796, John Adams was elected the president to take over for George Washington. Adams was a Federalist, someone that essentially believed in a stronger central government. The party of opposition during this period in American history was the Democratic Republican Party, who advocated for a weaker central government with more power being vested in the states. In the election of 1800, Federalist and current President John Adams was pitted against his Vice President Thomas Jefferson. The election focused on the big question: whether the American people wanted a stronger centralized government or a weaker one. In the end, after a close vote, Democratic Republican Jefferson was slated to become president, thus signaling for the first transition of power between political parties in American history. Leading up to Jefferson's inauguration in 1801, many people feared the Federalists would fight back violently to maintain their power. In the history of the world, the transfer of power involving groups with drastically different ideals had very rarely, if at all, not involved some sort of rebellion or bloodshed. The election of 1800 received the name of the Revolution of 1800 because power was shifted from one party to another. However, what was then considered revolutionary is now commonplace, as our country has consistently and successfully had different parties switching into power without violence. The so-called Revolution of 1800 was the first of these switches and an encouraging sign to the American people. Following the creation of the Democratic Republic, many people, including many American citizens, doubted whether such a form of government could be a viable option. A republic that fostered political disagreement and was built around constantly changing its main leader seemed to be doomed to fail. However, the election of 1800 validated what the Constitution had created and proved the validity of the democratic ideals as they had become the foundation for the new nation. The Revolution of 1800 exemplified American exceptionalism as it proved to the fledgling nation and the onlooking world that the democratic experiment could and would endure. In other countries throughout the history of the world, a complete change in political objectives could only consistently be achieved through violent and costly rebellion against a group of power. However, the United States is fundamentally different from other countries, as not only do we peacefully transfer power from one group to another, but we also advocate for disagreement to be used to foster discussion to decide the next course of action for our country. Andrew Carnegie is not the first name that is thought of when listing the most influential Americans in history. However, he is an ideal symbol of American exceptionalism for a number of reasons. In 1835, Carnegie was born into a poor family in Scotland. When he was 13, he moved with his family to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where Andrew got his first job working at a textile factory for only $1.20 a week. Carnegie quickly moved up the ladder because of his hard work and efficiency. In 1853, he got a job with the Pennsylvania Railroad. The superintendent, Thomas Scott, taught him all about the railroad business and investing. When Scott was Assistant Secretary of War during the Civil War, he told Carnegie that steel was a desired commodity. Following the war, Carnegie switched from the railroad industry to the steel industry, where he put into practice the technique of vertical integration. Using vertical integration, Carnegie invested in all the steps of steel production to make his product at a lower cost. Carnegie quickly became a millionaire, with most of his success coming in the last two decades of the 19th century. More important than how Carnegie got his wealth was what he did with it. In 1889, Carnegie published The Gospel of Wealth, an essay calling for all the wealthy businessmen to distribute their money for the common good. He called for philanthropy, an end to unnecessary expenditures by the wealthy. Carnegie put his money where his mouth was, as he had helped to create over 2,500 libraries in his lifetime, along with other charitable projects. As previously mentioned, Carnegie is an excellent symbol of American exceptionalism for a number of reasons. He is a true embodiment of the American dream, an idea that says that anyone can make it in America as long as they work hard and never give up. Carnegie came to America as a poor immigrant and died as a millionaire. This kind of social mobility is almost exclusively found in America. Also, the Gospel of Wealth and other philanthropic goals embody the ideals of the American Democratic Society, a society in which everybody donates towards the common good instead of towards self-serving motives. Because of his inspiring rags-to-riches story, his embodiment of democratic ideals, Andrew Carnegie is an exemplary symbol of American exceptionalism.
The Model T, also known as the Tin Lizzie, changed the way Americans live, work, and travel. The Model T has not only changed the United States, but has also defined it. When Ford Motor Company founder and president Henry Ford unveiled the prize Model T in October 1908, he hailed it as a motor car for the great multitude. That is exactly what it was. Ford's innovative Model T brought mobility within the reach of the average person in the United States. It was a reliable, no-nonsense, mass-produced automobile manufactured on a moving assembly line. The moving assembly line, incorporated into the factory in 1914, brought unprecedented efficiency to manufacturing. Assembly time per car dropped to just 90 minutes from just over 12 hours. Henry Ford's revolutionary advancements in assembly line automobile manufacturing made the Model T the first car to be affordable for a majority of Americans. For the first time, car ownership became a reality for average American workers, not just the wealthy. The Model T and the assembly line are the quintessence of American ingenuity and exceptionalism. The creation of the Model T exemplifies the United States' drive to improve and push forward in the world. It paved the way for a technological revolution in which the United States would be at the forefront. The copper and steel statue, formerly named Liberty Enlightening the World, now known as the Statue of Liberty, has been a fixture of New York City and a symbol for the nation. A symbol stands for an idea. The Statue of Liberty, which stands in Upper New York Bay, is a universal symbol for freedom. Originally conceived as an emblem of the friendship between the people of France and the United States, and a sign of their mutual desire for liberty, Over the years, it has become much more. It is the mother of exiles, greeting millions of immigrants and embodying hope and opportunity for those seeking a better life in America. It stirs the desire for freedom in people all over the world. It represents the United States itself. The Statue of Liberty embodies the American spirit and the belief in a land where all people are free. It symbolizes all the things that make America stand out from the rest of the world. The statue stands for freedom, equality, and new opportunities. It is the symbol of our exceptionalism.
Baseball is much more than just a sport to the American people. It has a vital connection to the development of the country. It is America's pastime. It has helped us get through the rigors of war, and it has helped to tear down the color barrier. Major League Baseball first began in America in 1871, and it quickly took off. Baseball became popular as it included everyone. Everyone, especially immigrants, became captivated with America's exciting new pastime. Baseball became increasingly important during the First and Second World War Wars. In World War I, baseball stars like Babe Ruth, Shoeless Joe Jackson, and Ty Cobb joined the force. In World War II, baseball became a source of comfort for the American people, an escape for just a couple hours a day from the horrors of the war overseas. Not only did the game continue at home during the war with support from President Roosevelt, but also thrived overseas and provided a break to the soldiers. Over 90% of Major League players were enlisted in the service during the time, creating new leagues as they served throughout the world. Baseball truly solidified its role as America's pastime during this war, as people grew connected with it as a daily escape from the war. Baseball wasn't and isn't just a game. It offered peace to its many fans as well as inclusion to immigrants who were commonly left out of American society. After the war ended, baseball continued to have a social impact in America as the color barrier was broken. 2 decades before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, Jackie Robinson became the first African-American player to join the major leagues, signing with Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. He became an all-star caliber player, and more important than his Hall of Fame career was the impact he had on the move towards civil rights. The integration of African-Americans into the major leagues turned baseball into an egalitarian institution, a symbol of equality even when equality was not supported by the national government. After this, ball games brought the American people together. It taught them to forget about the differences, but instead to focus on what they have in common, the love for the game. Jack Barazin once said that whoever wants to know the heart and mind of America better learn baseball. The baseball and the game linked to it are symbols of American exceptionalism because of their acceptance of everyone. Just like how baseball has been seen as a source of solace and comfort, America has always been seen as a place of opportunity for immigrants, a place where people share common interests. While other countries advocate for cultural homogeneity, the institution of baseball and America as a whole are unique as they welcome diversity and unite people behind common interests.
President Kennedy's New Frontier policy envisioned programs to fight poverty, help cities, and expand governmental benefits to a wide array of Americans. In a speech given at the University of Michigan for his presidential campaign, Kennedy was inspired with the idea of the Peace Corps, an organization comprised of volunteers aiding in the development of countries in need. He challenged the students to work for the government and to offer their services to the world.
How many of you who are going to be doctors are willing to spend your days in Ghana, technicians or engineers? How many of you are willing to work in the Foreign Service and spend your lives traveling around the world? On your willingness to do that, not merely to serve 1 year or 2 years in the service, but on your willingness to contribute part of your life to this country, I think will depend the answer whether a free society can compete. I think it can, and I think Americans are willing to contribute, but the effort must be far greater than we've ever made in the past. And therefore I'm delighted to come to Michigan, this university, because unless we have those resources in this school, unless you comprehend the nature of what is being asked of you, this country can't possibly move through the next 10 years in a period of relative strength. So I come here tonight to go to bed, But I also come here tonight to ask you to join in the effort.
With tremendous support from college students and young adults, President Kennedy signed Executive Order 1092-4 establishing the Peace Corps. This document outlines the functions and funding of the international organization. As stated in the Executive Order, the Peace Corps shall be responsible for the training and service abroad of men and women of the United States in new programs of assistance to nations and areas of the world, and in conjunction with or in support of existing economic assistance programs of the United States and of the United Nations and other international organizations. This simple, concise document has had a tremendous impact on countries around the world. The Peace Corps' mission is straightforward yet ambitious: to help the people of interested countries in meeting their need for trained men and women, to help promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of the people served, and to help promote a better understanding of other peoples on the part of Americans. Through the goals listed in the Executive Order, Americans can actively participate in the cause of global democracy, peace, development, and freedom, which follows Kennedy's goal of encouraging American international involvement. Volunteers who dedicate their service are not paid, but instead they receive a stipend for room, board, and few essentials. While accomplishing these goals proved to be difficult, the outcomes have substantial effects around the globe to the present. Through the Peace Corps, the United States is able to act as a global peace commissioner and contribute to the development of and improvement of the world. Thus, Executive Order 1092-4 correctly illustrates American exceptionalism because through the Peace Corps, Americans are able to intervene in other countries and promote peace. Other countries prefer to remain isolationists, yet Executive Order 1092-4 allows America to actively participate in global affairs.
I have today signed an executive order providing for the establishment of a Peace Corps on a temporary pilot basis. I'm also sending to Congress a message proposing authorization of a permanent Peace Corps. This Corps will be a pool of trained men and women sent overseas by the United States government or through private institutions and organizations to help foreign countries meet their urgent needs for skilled manpower. It is our hope to have between 500 to 1,000 people in the field by the end of this year.
The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom took place on our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on August 28, 1963. Civil and racial unrest was a prevailing characteristic of the time period, and people across the country were exposed to it, not only in the streets but also through media coverage. In response, several civil protests and demonstrations took place from state to state, eventually leading up to the March on Washington in 1963. The march brought together several civil rights organizations, peaceful protesters, supporters, speakers, and others, adding up to a grand total of over 250,000 attendees. Many of the things they were advocating included laws prohibiting racial discrimination in hiring for work, protection of peaceful protesters and demonstrators against police brutality and violence, the elimination of racial segregation in public schools, public works programs to provide jobs, and more. The march was simultaneously a protest and a celebration. It was a protest of injustices against civil rights, but also a celebration that ensued from the collaboration of people from all across the nation coming together to peacefully and civilly speak for an important movement. Inspiring speeches evoked feelings of hope, unity, and justice. The most famous speech of the march being Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, which is also one of the most famous speeches in American history.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I say to you today, my friend, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
The March on Washington brought together thousands of blacks and whites protesting a common cause that needed to be addressed and brought to the nation's attention. The moving words of Dr. King's speech and the images of unity and peace amongst the Americans did not go unnoticed. The march called attention to President Kennedy's Civil Rights Bill and advanced the cause of civil rights throughout the nation. The Civil Rights Act was passed the next year, and the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, together outlawing segregated public facilities and prohibiting discriminatory practices in employment and voting. The achievements of the March on Washington reverberated throughout society and provided a model for social change. The march inspired Americans across the nation to stand up for equal rights and equal opportunities, no matter the gender, race, ethnicity, disability, etc. of the person. The United States was quickly developing into the nation it is today, becoming a model for the rest of the world to look to. With its racial and religious and civil tolerance and advocacy of civil rights, the March on Washington was an extremely important stepping stone that led to the exemplary ideals of the nation and equal opportunity and rights offered to all. As previously mentioned, the 1960s were a time of civil unrest and injustice. Although reforms were implemented throughout the decade and civil rights were granted to African Americans, social and political tensions remained. African Americans had the same legal rights as whites, but still were not as integrated into society as they would later become. One of the catalysts of this integration was, believe it or not, a science fiction television show. Star Trek is regarded as one of the most culturally influential TV shows, and the most influential science fiction show in history. The series, airing from 1966 to 1969, used science fiction and futuristic scenarios to address problems of the time such as racism, sexism, discrimination, warfare, slavery, and more. Not only did the show host the first interracial kiss to ever be aired on US television, but the multi-ethnic cast also included an African-American female communications officer, a Russian navigator, a Scottish engineer, a Japanese-American helmsman, and even an alien first officer. When the pilot of the show was originally released, critics were taken aback by a woman so close in command to the captain and suggested that the producer, Gene Roddenberry, throw the character out or demote her. Roddenberry, however, ignored these criticisms. He not only kept the woman working on the bridge alongside the captain, but also showed women taking important roles throughout the seasons as scientists, officers, engineers, and more. One of the most evident allegories of racism is present in the episode Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, in which two inhabitants of an alien planet have been intercepted by the Enterprise while pursuing each other on their ships. It is discovered that one of the aliens, Beale, is white on the left side of his face and black on the right side, while the other alien, Lokai, is black on the left side of his face and white on the right side. Although they look almost identical, the two men have an immense hatred for each other, and it is revealed that those with white on the left side of the faces had enslaved those with black on the left side of the faces for thousands of years. At the end of the episode, the two men are returned to their home planet which, after thousands of years of fighting, is completely destroyed and filled with corpses and crumbled buildings. The races have fought themselves to the death, and the result was a Holocaust, for which Beale and Lokai blame each other's races for. The men continue to fight, and Captain Kirk notes the effects of what hatred can drive somebody to do. Although today this seems like an obvious lesson, this was a groundbreaking episode for the 1960s. It directly challenged slavery, racism, discrimination, and unnecessary warfare, at a time when these were mostly all socially accepted. Such controversial themes were usually not incorporated into American television, but Star Trek boldly went where no television show had gone before.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Lokai is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Well, look at me. Look at me.
You're black on one side and white on the other.
I am black on the right side.
I fail to see the significant difference.
Lokai is white on the right side. All of his people are white on the right side.
Star Trek was bold in its approaches and demonstrated strong viewpoints on the problems that were afflicting society at the time on a nationwide scale. With carefully written episodes that often dealt with pursuing justice, equal rights, and peace, Star Trek was and is a great representation of our nation's exceptionalism. It sought to enforce equality and bring about change and liberty where needed, just as our country is a safe haven for those in need of equal rights, opportunities, and justice. Even though it is only a television show that ran for 3 years, Star Trek shaped the nation into what it is today and still makes an impact on its citizens today.
Look at these 3 words written larger than the rest, with a special pride never written before or since. Tall words, proudly saying, "We the people." That what you call id plebnista was not written for the chiefs or the kings or the warriors or the rich or the powerful, but for all the people. Down the centuries, you have slurred the meaning out of the words, "We the people of the United States," in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution. These words and the words that follow were not written only for the Yangs, but for the Coms as well.
The Coms?
They must apply to everyone, or they mean nothing. Do you understand? Gentlemen, the fighting is over here. I suggest we leave them to discover their history and their liberty.